Hi, can I thank Neil Mercer, Professor of Education at the University of Cambridge, for appearing on NAPE's YouTube channel. This presentation was originally posted for the 2023 summit, and I thought it was too good not to put this video, with Neil's permission, into the public domain. Enjoy.
Hi, it's good to be with you today, if only virtually. As you'll see from the title, I'm going to talk about ways we can enable young people to think together more effectively. And what I'll do is provide some background in research to justify why I think this is important. And then I'll move on to talk about some practical implications, some of the ways that things can be done in primary classrooms to take account of this and make it happen. So I hope what I say is useful and interesting. Thanks for your attention. I'd like to start by addressing this question: what is distinctive about human thinking? Well, I think one of the most distinctive features of the way we think as humans is that we can do it not only individually but collectively. This might sound a bit strange because thinking seems to be something that goes on inside one person's head, but in fact what we're able to do, especially through using the wonderful toolkit of language, is kind of create a mega brain. So two heads are better than one, and we can actually together address problems which an individual might never be able to clearly see or solve. And we're the only animals that can do this. Bees, for example, can communicate very effectively using their waggle dance about where nectar is. They can tell each other that. But at the end of a day, bees can't get together and say, it didn't go very well today. What can we do tomorrow? Let's have a think about it. They can't do that. We can. We've got this capacity. And language has evolved as an intrinsic part of our human intelligence. It's not like an app stuck on the side. It's something that's part of the way we naturally think. And it's something which has evolved as part of human nature, if you like. So effective ways of language are able to be learned by children, but that is the important issue. Unlike the bees' language, it's not hardwired. Children have an inbuilt capacity to learn language, but they're not born knowing it. And least of all, are they born knowing how to use it well. And that's something that they need to be able to get help from other people with learning. And they do so by taking part in communications in their community, but they also hopefully will get that kind of help from being in school. And so that's why I'm arguing that if we want children to be able to use the wonderful toolkit of language to think effectively with other people and address the problems that we all face in the world today, then they need help from that from their teachers. One way of putting what we're able to do with language is to say, using talk, we can do more than interact, we can interthink. This word interthinking is, funnily enough, one that Lynn Dawes and I thought up sometime in the 90s when we were trying to think together about how to describe this kind of process. And we actually can't remember which of us thought of this particular word. And the book by Karen Littleton and myself describes lots of ways that we've looked at this process, not just in classrooms, but in other settings too. But for this, what we're talking about today, I'd like to suggest that if children are helped to learn how to interthink, they'll be more able to do some pretty crucial things. One is to learn from each other more effectively in class, and I'll go on to say more about that later. But also they'll be able to work well in teams and groups outside the classroom in their future lives to get things done. And take a more active role in their communities and society, because they'll be good at working with other people to solve problems that face us in the world today, in specific locations or wherever they find themselves. So this is the reason why I think it's a really important goal for education in the future. So what does it require, the skill of interthinking? Well, it requires many things, and I'll go on to suggest what they are, but let's just pick some out now. One of them is we want children to be confident and clear in their self-expression. They should be able to confidently and clearly explain what they're thinking. Okay, I don't think anybody would disagree with that. They should also become able to listen and take account of other perspectives. Part of interthinking is keeping quiet and listening to what other people are saying and making sense of it, and asking them more about what they're saying, and asking them questions that help you to understand what they're thinking. And then thirdly, they should be learning which ways of talking help you solve problems with others and which ways don't. And I'll say something about that in a minute. Now, just in case you think these are sort of things that I'm suggesting that are perhaps outside the normal scope of the curriculum, it's very reassuring, in fact, that I found that Ofsted, in a research review publication in 2022, said the necessary skills for these forms of talk required direct and explicit teaching and practice. So for once, I feel Ofsted's on my side. And this is the sort of thing that I'm going to say we should be doing more of in school. So let's be clear. Children won't learn how to interthink well on their own. The very nature of the process, as I've explained by reference to Vygotsky, is that it's a cycle in which through their interactions with adults, they learn about new ways of thinking through ways of language, but then they feed those back into their interactions with adults. So, for example, a teacher can take account of the level of their understanding as they've expressed it in language to teach them more about what they need to know. And so teachers have a really crucial role for developing children's interthinking skills. And I just wish the policymakers in this country, unlike some others, would realise more how much this should be given priority in primary education. We'll just have to hope that this will eventually get through and it will be given the attention it deserves. So I would say to you, if you're a teacher, don't underestimate your influence on children's language use, on children's language development, and on the way they use language to get things done. And Noreen Webb, who's an American psychologist who's done work very similar to my own, she on the basis of reviewing the work that she'd done on group work in schools, she suggests, as it says here, the biggest influence how students talk in groups is how you as a teacher talk with them. And so really, I say this to the PGCE students at Cambridge when I speak to them. I'm sorry to say this, but you may be the only hope for many children for developing to the full their capacity for using language as an effective tool for thinking, both individually and with others, because they may not get it from anywhere else. So I think, as a teacher, it's a horrible responsibility in a way, but it's there. You might be their only hope for achieving this kind of level of skill that one would hope they would all achieve eventually. I'm going to say something about group work because group work is an obvious location for developing children's interthinking skills. But before I do, I'd like to just say a bit more about whole class discussions because, as it says here, they can also help children develop relevant skills in interthinking, which is one of the ways teachers can take a leading role in that development. I'm going to explain why in relation to a research project I was involved in recent years, which is the Cambridge ESRC Classroom Dialogue project. In this project, which I carried out with Christine Howe, Sarah Hennessy, Maria Vriki and Lisa Wheatley, we studied Year 6 classrooms. We went in and asked teachers of Year 6 classes in schools in the southeast of England, about 70 teachers, if we could record them carrying out lessons in maths and English, and we also did science, but I'll focus on maths and science just for now. And we said, don't change what you're doing. We just want to see how you do it. Can we record you, please? And we also looked at some of the group work in those classrooms. And of those teachers who agreed to do so, we obtained these videos of them teaching curriculum subjects. We then compared the teachers in terms of the kinds of ways they used talk in their classrooms, especially in whole class discussions. And they vary quite a bit. And on the basis of earlier research that had been done by lots of people in smaller scale projects, this was one of the first really big large scale projects, we were able to show that certain ways of using talk, organising the use of talk, if you like, in the classroom, were associated with better results in SATs, in maths and English. I'm not a lover of SATs in many ways, but at least it was an objective test of how well these children were doing against a certain sort of benchmark in their learning of the curriculum. And so we're able to say, what were the most effective teachers doing that was distinctive? Well, these are the things. Teachers who got lots of children contributing to whole class discussions, that is, they achieved high levels of participation in classroom talk. That was one of the factors that helped them get better results for their children. Secondly, that they encouraged children in these whole class discussions to elaborate their ideas. Can you explain a bit more what you mean by that? And thirdly, they encouraged the questioning of ideas by students. Do you agree that Tom is right? So they were encouraging, if you like, some interthinking in the whole class. And so they were doing this. Some teachers were doing these things much more than others. And what's more, interestingly, we found for the first time that that they only really got better results if they did all of these three things. Because I think these were teachers who were using talk. They're really indicators of something more profound, which was that they had a dialogic classroom in which they were encouraging children to learn to use talk for thinking in a way that some other teachers weren't. And I'll just say at the bottom there, number 4, we found they organised productive group work, but I'll say something more about that in a minute. So you can read more about this if you want. I'll provide references and things at the end. But we could see in these whole class discussions, not only were they helping these students, these children, get better at maths and English, so they got better results, they were also helping them develop their interthinking skills. But this is all perhaps a little bit vague. Let's think, what does interthinking look like? I mean, what do I mean by it? I mean, you know, if you were going around a classroom and you wanted to see some children interthinking, what would they be doing? Or if you went into a staff meeting or a team meeting in some company trying to design something, what would you see that made you think, well, this is some interthinking going on? Well, you would see these things. People would be sharing relevant information, not just keeping it to themselves. They'd be engaging with each other's ideas in a way that could be critical. I'm not sure you're right about that, but constructive, because they'd be aiming for a common goal, helping to achieve something collectively. They'd give reasons for their ideas, why they disagreed perhaps, or why they thought this was a particularly good way to proceed. And they'd all take part. You wouldn't get some people just sitting there opting out and letting the rest of them carry on with it. And what's more, if they didn't understand what somebody meant, they wouldn't be scared to ask a question. Can you explain a bit more? I'm not sure what you mean by. And they build on each other's responses. So it wasn't a case of, well, let me have a talk and then I'll just sit quiet, and then somebody else did. They'd say, on the basis of what Tom said, I think we could start there and move on to consider that kind of thing. This is what interthinking looks like. And from the research in the book that I mentioned that I wrote with Karen Littleton, we took examples of this happening not only in schools, but in design companies, musicians rehearsing together, other people's research on government meetings, how they went right and wrong, and how people in many sort of professional settings could actually use language to progress their common goals and achieve the outcomes they're after. And so they would also be striving for agreement. And this is a crucial aspect, I think, of working in a group. If you're working to design a new iPhone, you can't just say, oh, let's agree to differ, you know. You've got to come up with one idea and then defend it. And the same applies to children working in groups, in class. My colleague Christine Howe has found in her research that when children are asked by a teacher to try and agree on an answer when they're working in a group, and then they have to reveal what that answer is to the rest of the class, they actually learn better answers, they achieve better results, but they also remember better what they've learned than those who were just told to work together and, you know, at the end of it, that's the end of the group work. So these are crucial things. And there's a name for this kind of discussion, this specific kind of way of using language, and that's exploratory talk. It's a term that came up, that was thought up by one of my other academic heroes who I mentioned, Douglas Barnes, the classroom talk researcher from the 1960s and 70s. And it's a term that now I think well describes this kind of use of language for thinking constructively together. In America, it's often called accountable talk, but it's basically the same sort of thing. Let's have a look at it then to get a bit more down to some detail. Now, this is talk that my colleagues and I recorded amongst a group of 3 Year 5 students, and it was before, in a project that we're working with teachers, before the teacher had done any teaching of interthinking, of how to use exploratory talk. That was what we were going to go on and do. But this is what the children were working together like before any of that intervention that we were working with the teachers. They're working on a maths problem. I don't think I need to go into details of the maths problem, but you can just see how they're interacting. The 3 of them in the group. Alan says, "It's my turn." Sylvie says, "No, you don't know what to do. I know." "Yeah, but it's my turn." "Wait. No, me and Sylvia should have 2 turns each." "No, wait a minute. I didn't have a turn before. I didn't have a turn. 33 and then adds 5. My turn." I've got an idea. "Alan, you're always having a turn." "Yeah, but I'm faster than you and you can't do anything." "No, shut up." Well, that's not very effective interthinking, is it? And what's more, you'll see that there's only 2 names there, but there are apparently 3 of them in the group, so somebody was just opting out. This kind of talk, unfortunately, is the kind of talk that can happen quite a lot in group work in schools, and it's what's given group work a bad name and encouraged some teachers to give up on it. And I think that's very unfortunate. If you see group work like this happening in a class, it's because, generally speaking, that they haven't been taught how to interthink, how to do it. And any teacher who says, "Oh, I've given up on group work because they just waste their time and can't do it," I say, it's your fault because you haven't taught them how to do it. And I've sat in adult meetings in the university and elsewhere when people needed some lessons in interthinking. So it's something we can't take for granted. This kind of talk, the non-productive kind, is known as disputational talk, and it's what we don't really need in classrooms or any other kinds of collective endeavour anywhere. And yet we get it. I mean, look, you can see where it happens. It happens in places that we'd rather it didn't happen. And the issue with disputational talk is it doesn't solve problems. We don't really want it. What we want is to help children develop interthinking skills, to be able to use exploratory talk when they need to and get things done collectively for their own benefit and that of everybody else. So through the research I've done with Rupert Wegeruth, Lynn Dawes, Karen Littleton, Paul Warwick, Sarah Hennessy, many other people, we've developed really some steps which will help you as a teacher develop those interthinking skills in the classes that you're working with, that you're responsible for. And I'll just run through them. A series of steps. There's a song, actually, isn't there? 3 steps to heaven. Well, this is a few more steps than that. And it's not quite heaven you achieve at the end, but you achieve something better than what you had when you started. The first step, use a whole class discussion to raise children's awareness of how they talk and work together. Perhaps more than one whole class discussion. But that's one of the things we should be doing in what I think would now be called oracy education. Isn't just teaching ways of talking, but raising their awareness of talk and how it works. Just as when we're teaching reading and writing and maths, we're raising their awareness of how the written word and numbers operate. This should be part of what we do in schools. Second step, ask them to say what they think makes discussions, group work go well or badly. You'll be surprised they often come up with some pretty insightful answers. And even the ones that do might not be doing the right things, but they know what goes wrong. Oh yes, in our group, Delia always just talks all the time and doesn't listen to anybody. Or, well, I can't ever get Tom to speak, so it's useless having him in a group. The third step, pick out the important features of a good discussion. You're the teacher, you know about this in a way they don't. And you can put these up and say, look, you've said some of these things. There are some others too. You can add any other features of exploratory talk in kind of child-friendly language in the way that you will know how to do for the age group you're working with. And then you would convert these into a set of ground rules for thinking together, which they should agree to follow. By ground rules, I mean informal guidelines. Voice 21, the leading oracy charity, calls them discussion guidelines. They're the same thing. It's some way that we can make the reality of the group discussion, bring it out into the open, make it public and visible, and think about it with the class and say, let's do it this way. And then you need to give them some well-designed group work tasks. And I could do talks on just that and presentations on that and just on ground rules, but obviously I haven't got time here. And then with the class, I think any class you're working with them to develop their interthinking skills, review the group work at the end of each week, focusing on the quality of their discussions so that they are becoming more self-aware of how they use talk to get things done and how they're improving. And I think they'll find that very reassuring themselves, and I'm sure you will too. And there are ways you can feed into their understanding of talk. For example, in my colleagues Lynn Dawes and Claire Sams, who wrote this book, Talkbox, for teaching primary oracy, they suggest you can introduce them some talk tools. They're sentence stems, aren't they, is a common word for describing them, that can help children use talk effectively. You can give them models like, what do you think? I think because, I agree because, can you say a bit more please? We know that sentence stems are a helpful way of helping children develop their writing, and it can help with the development of their spoken language skills too. But let's have a look then at some ground rules that a teacher has put together on the basis of a series of steps like that, whereby the children are willing to take these on when they work together in a group. Here's a class year 5 set of ground rules. And you can see they are a child-friendly definition of exploratory talk. Everybody should have a chance to talk. Everybody's ideas should be carefully considered. Each member of the group should be asked, what do you think? Why do you think that? There's a sort of sentence stems kind of idea. Look and listen to the person talking, and after discussing, agree what to do. And we found this approach, using the right kind of ground rules written in the right way, explained in the right way, can work with children as young as 5 or 6 and as old as 15 or 16, and in fact with adults too. So this is what I'm suggesting is a practical way of helping children become better at interthinking. So let's look a bit more at the process of getting them to learn how to do so. Imagine a teacher has set up the ground rules. She's got some good group work activities for the children to do together. And she's now going to set them off on one of these activities in a lesson in which they'll use these skills that they're developing. Here's a transcript of a teacher doing so. And I've put a date on it because I want to follow this through in time a little bit within this class that we recorded as they were carrying out this intervention on how to develop children's skills in thinking together. So she says, okay, before you go to the next step on the computer, they're going to do some maths problems again. What do you need to make sure that the whole group has done? Oh, more hands up than that, Emma. Emma says, they agreed. Yes, the whole group needs to agree. You'll recall that is one of the things that that was an important aspect of exploratory talk. Okay, one of my speech bubbles, she writes, agree up on the whiteboard. I wonder what kind of things we might hear each other saying during today's lessons. What do you think? What do you think? There it is again, the stem. Anything else you might hear people saying as we have today's lesson? Kay, what's your idea? Brilliant. What's your idea? Oh, Sydney, why do you think that? Excellent. Well done. If you want to see a video of this process going on, there's a link which you can follow up on the website, the Cambridge Faculty of Education website, and you can have a look at the teacher actually doing this in real life. But you can see what she's doing there. She's rehearsing it with them, and she's actually for once, I would say she's very usefully asking some closed questions because she wants to be sure that they do understand what they're going to go on and do on the basis of what they've done before. Okay, let's have a look next at what happens when the students get together. Here's a group, Aaron, Michael and Nirma, working on some maths problems. It's a bit later in the year, as you'll see, than when the teacher led through them that whole class discussion. Aaron says, 4, what do you think? Yes, 4. Is 15 a multiple of 4? No, 4 4s are 16. Yes, it is. No, no, no. Is 9? No. Why do you think that? Because it goes 4, 8, then 12, and so it misses 9 out. So you can see what they're doing here. Let's just have a look at it. You can see in the coloured bits of their language that they're using those sentence stems, those models the teachers provided, and they're using them actively, if a bit what might seem woodenly at first, to carry on this discussion. But it's working, isn't it? Nirma asks Aaron, why do you think that? And he gives a reason, a good reason for why he thinks that's right, as an answer to the problem they're facing. And they all take part. They ask each other questions to find out what they each think. And they're building on what they're doing as they proceed. They're building on each other's ideas. So let's have a look a bit later. So here's a group in the same class a bit later in June. You've got Sophia, Bo and Kirsty. They're doing the maths problems again. Sophia says 5, 7 and 5 and 12 equals, 5, 7 and 5 equals 12. So put 5. Do you agree, says Bo. Yes, and then we need to sort this out. I know, why don't we use the 7 again? What do we do now? What do you think we should do, says Sophia. I don't know, it's too hard. I've never done this before. I haven't done this before. What can we remember? Well, what can you see happening here? They're all joining in. They're all expressing their ideas. They're checking whether they agree. They're asking each other questions. And Sophia ends up with, what can we remember? It's a we conversation, isn't it? They're doing it collectively. They're putting their heads together and they're trying to solve this as a group. And they're using exploratory talk. And what's more, they would know that they were doing that as well, because they're self-aware of how they go about working in a group now. So what do children who are involved in a project like that learn that might be useful to them in the future? Well, the most obvious thing is they learn how to work better together to solve problems in the classroom. But they also become more aware of how to use talk for learning. They become self-aware. They're using the ground rules that they've worked out with their teacher, and they know about exploratory talk. And so they become better at reasoning together. But what we found, which was really important, equally as important, was that Vygotsky was right. By being involved in those new ways of using language for reasoning, they became better at reasoning individually. They improved their individual scores on the Raven's progressive matrices, which is a test of intelligence, effectively, which you're not meant to be able to improve your scores on that very easily. So they were actually improving their thinking skills as well. So that means that the ways of using language that the teacher taught them shaped the ways that they thought, and in very useful ways too. My vision for the future then is that all children will be taught how to interthink. I hope I've explained that we do know how to do this. And in fact, many teachers, many of you are doing things that are part of that process already. I just think we need to perhaps realise more clearly what's involved and why it's important, and really ensure that all children everywhere take part in this learning. If we do, they're not only then better prepared for learning in school, for working in groups, taking part in classroom discussions, and understanding the world through interacting with other people. They'll also develop their individual cognitive abilities. They'll develop their thinking skills through, as Vygotsky suggested, by being involved in ways of using language, they develop new ways of thinking. And so they become more able to take on creative, collaborative roles outside school in future working life, the sort of thing employers say they want from people nowadays. And so they'll be able to work more effectively with others in the world to get things done. If you'd like more information about the things I've been talking about today and some useful resources for classroom teaching, then have a look at our websites, Oracy Cambridge, Thinking Together, and the CEDIA site. I'm pretty sure you'll find things of interest there. So I hope very much that I've convinced you that teaching children how to interthink is an important goal for the future in education. And thanks for listening. On the final slide, which follows this, I've put up the references to the research I've referred to today. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.